Welcome. Today's post is Voyager. Published on December 25, 2022. This post has one of the strangest patterns I've ever come across. It connects Apple to Carl Sagan and Beavis and Butthead. There's a lot to dig into. Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. This post came about due to one of the strangest patterns I've ever come across. Did you know they once made a Macintosh with the code name of Carl Sagan? After Carl Sagan read this code name in Macweek, he threatened to sue them. They then changed the code name of the upcoming Macintosh to Butthead Astronomer. Why is that strange? December 20, 1996. Carl Sagan death, code-named Butthead Astronomer. December 20, 1996. Beavis and Butthead do America. Note that he discusses Beavis and Butthead in his book. Understanding why this is a thing was quite a journey. Let me take you on it. We will all understand the world a little better by the end. So this decode began due to a reader requesting a decode of the Carl Sagan's famous pale blue dot Earth image. I actually failed the first time, but the reader was so enthusiastic in the request I decided to put my entire being into digging. As a bit of background, it is an image of Earth the size of a pixel and only came about due to Carl Sagan begging NASA for an image of Earth for months. They agreed, and on Valentine's Day of 1990 a picture was taken. The pixel-sized dot is said to invoke awe in viewers as they feel insignificant. I don't assume something like this is a comm right off the bat. Just because comms exist doesn't mean everything is a comm. This could be merely what it is presented as and nothing more. The only way we can determine which is by examining patterns. Using the scientific method which Carl Sagan is noted as quite fond of. Obviously it ended up being a comm, otherwise I wouldn't have made the post, and it's funny to me that I only realized it was taken on Valentine's Day after having written the entire rest of the post. You'll see why that's funny later when we get into what it really means. Often a pattern won't become visible until I dig up the original news reporting around the time. In this case the pattern emerged when I read a famous story about how Carl Sagan sued Apple twice. They had a Macintosh with a code name Carl Sagan sitting alongside two other Macs code named after fake science. After Carl Sagan read these code names in Macweek, he threatened to sue them. They then called the upcoming Macintosh the Butthead Astronomer. Why does it matter that Apple called Carl Sagan a butthead? Butthead Astronomer and the pale blue dot. Take a look. December 20, 1996. Carl Sagan death, Butthead Astronomer. December 20, 1996. Beavis and Butthead do America. Right after Apple calls Carl Sagan a butthead, he dies the same day as Butthead gets a major motion picture. Not only that, but Carl Sagan's book around that same time discusses Beavis and Butthead as popular. Notice how there are news stories that bring up this passage about Carl Sagan talking about social media and Beavis and Butthead being popular. I highlight two articles, but there are many more. If you read that passage by Sagan above, you'll see it's very applicable to what the world has become. The dumbing down of society, that is, and this is critical for understanding the symbolism of the pale blue dot. 1994, pale blue dot, Earth, Carl Sagan. 1995, demon-haunted world, Earth, Carl Sagan. 1996, Carl Sagan death/Beavis and Butthead film. Notice that both of Carl Sagan's books around this time have titles that refer to Earth. The second of which referring to the ignorance plaguing the world like Beavis and Butthead. This ignorance symbol ties into the Apple code name, Butthead Astronomer, because remember that there were three Mac code names, the first of which was Carl Sagan and the other two were hoax, pseudosciences. Given all of this, I'd say it's highly likely his death was a comm. Even though it's stated he died, this does not always mean it's real. This is as true as trusting the mainstream media to report anything accurately. It's better to assume it's real until we see strong evidence to the contrary. A good indicator is usually when the celebrity themselves is using comms that tie into their deaths, like with Carl Sagan here. I have decoded some celebrities' death as a vehicle to send messages. Obviously many that are reported to die are actual deaths, but when we are dealing with patterns like this it puts it all into doubt. Even though we have identified a pattern, it does little to answer why. Why would the end of Carl Sagan connect to Beavis and Butthead peaking in popularity? The way to begin solving this riddle is by understanding the elements involved. We have to decode Carl Sagan, Beavis and Butthead, as well as Apple. I began this decode to understand the pale blue dot, and as you can see with decoding it quickly becomes a giant list of things we have to research first. Let's begin with the most important. Carl Sagan's Cosmos. The project Carl Sagan became most famous for was his show in 1980 titled Cosmos. So I took a look to see if there were dates that relate to the early 1990s. September 27, 1980, Cosmos TV Guide Week begins. September 28, 1980, Cosmos debut hosted by Carl Sagan. September 30, 1980, Ethernet becomes world's networking standard. October 3, 1980, Cosmos TV Guide Weekend. If they had a timing with Cosmos with the Internet. Why? If you watch Cosmos you'll notice it's all framed as traveling long distances quickly. Symbol of the Internet. Notice the intro added by his wife 20 years after first airing talks about the Internet and how his series prophesized much of what happened in science since. At a glance this seems illogical because how does it make any sense for him to be sending comms about the Internet if there was no Internet? The Internet didn't just pop into existence. Using computers to talk to one another across the country dates back to the 70s, long before Cosmos. The proto-internet is what morphed into the Internet, and of course that had all sorts of comms tied to it. In fact, the Finders cult was notable for using TRS-80s to do exactly that in coordinating education for nudist abused children. When did the TRS-80 come out? 17 days after Voyager 2. The Voyager was a project Carl Sagan was assigned to. August 3, 1977, TRS-80 Bill Gates coded proto-internet enabled computer used by the Finders cult. Best-selling PC on market. Plus 17Q, Q clearance month. August 20, 1977, Voyager 2 launch with Carl Sagan golden disc inside. August 3, 1977. MK Ultra hearing Senate. August 4, 1977, DOE founded, Q clearance. August 15, 1977, Carl Sagan seeking other worlds, Newsweek. 1980 TRS-80 telephone interface 2. 1980 Cosmos by Carl Sagan. TRS-80 being the best-selling personal computer on the market, connected to telephones to transmit data, was also tied to Bill Gates and Paul Allen, as before they started Microsoft they were working on the TRS-80. The TRS-80 and Voyager are literally the origins of Microsoft, which itself was tied to the early period of the Internet and the CIA-owned Finders, noted in the FBI document above. If you read some of the history of the Finders you can begin to understand the symbolism of different planets, that places that brainwash children are like lab environments with experiments. Many at the time coordinating with the TRS-80. The foundation of the Internet itself began through these secretive CIA practices. March 4, 1979, U.S. Voyager I photo reveals Jupiter's rings. March 4, 1979. Pope John Paul II publishes his blueprint for his pontificate in its exploration, encyclical Redemptor Hominis. Science news, whether accurate or not, is stuffed with comms defining the real news. Like for example seeing coordination of rings begin anew with a new technology. What does it mean to introduce the Internet to the world? Think about that. There was a decision to create an information network and the TRS-80 was part of this. Having a computer be the most popular computer on the market is no simple feat. It requires massive amounts of money to push as well as get the parts at the right price to facilitate mass adoption. This is what the CIA media control is good for. In the sense of evolution, it's not an inherently immoral practice when it's done with betterment of mankind at heart. However, as we all know, that's hardly the end of the story. In fact, notice that date above is also tied to the MKUltra hearings, because the point here was in creating new invisibility for cells to coordinate. This gets to the heart of what shooting things into space symbolizes. Why billions of dollars are spent. The short answer is they create stars, they shoot things into the sky, and it's tied to media pushes. This doesn't only signify celebrities but products and societal pushes. For example, the internet itself. The implication here being secrecy and transitioning from whatever system they had before to one using phone lines and computers. This also means Voyager equals internet symbolism. This connection will become more clear later, but note that there are only 5 probes that have left the solar system, the 2 Voyager probes and the 2 Pioneer probes being the original 4. November 24, 1995. HTML20. The IETF organization published the RFC 1866 specification for HTML20. HTML20 supported forms tables. November 24, 1995. Pioneer 2 last contact end of mission. This may be coincidence, but given Pioneer in 1973 was the predecessor to Voyager in 1977, having it end communication when the modern internet begins seems like a calm. Voyager's system worked on the phone lines, and while I'm not sure what Pioneer symbolized, it would have likely been whatever predated that and was then phased out. Perhaps a reader knows the answer to this. Anyway, now that we understand Voyager equals internet symbolism and Voyager took the pale blue dot, what then is the pale blue dot? Why pale blue dot? How are websites defined? .com. .gov. 1990 pale blue dot picture taken. 1991 first website created at CERN. Okay, that helps explain that dot, but why pale? Why Beavis and Butthead? Pale. As in something that's weak. November 8, 1994. Pale blue dot book released. November 9, 1994. Carl Sagan turns 60 soon after diagnosed with myelodysplasia. Sagan was diagnosed with a syndrome defined by immature cells that don't mature, poorly formed. How do you define Beavis and Butthead? Immature and poorly formed? Can you think of any other fictional characters that have ever existed that more closely symbolize that? I can't. In fact, in the film released the same day Carl Sagan died after his diagnosis of immature cells. In fact, one of the jokes in the movie released that day is when they have a flashback, they see themselves as being literally the same from early childhood. Symbolism of the stunted development. Why would it be important for Carl Sagan to send this message? What does the death of Carl Sagan represent? Note this passage by him, talking about people evolving beyond reptile brain heritage. Did the people in power at that time want the masses to evolve or de-evolve? Which way would the end of Carl Sagan represent? Remember what I said about the pale blue dot being important in relation to it being Valentine's Day. February 14, 1990. Pale blue dot picture taken. April 30, 1990. Star Trek TNG, episode Hollow Pursuits with Hologram Addiction. Symbol for pornography addiction internet. May 1, 1990. Pale blue dot finishes sending image. An episode right at the start of the internet age about hollow pursuits of having sexual fantasies in a holodeck. Symbol of internet pornography sending a message. Hollow pursuits. Does this also define Beavis and Butthead? Of course. The very first scene in the film, actually. A dream sequence where Butthead does what? Begins with looking at windows and pulling a girl he wants into them. Symbolism of internet porn with the most popular operating system. I'll give the quick answer now as to why these connections exist and then extensively show my research for it. I believe it's all about pacifying the populace. Remember Carl Sagan's book? The Demon-Haunted World. The answer has to do with the direction of the world. The decision to shepherd hooligans from violence into idiocy and perversion. Specifically dangerous conditioned citizens. It is much more than just that, but the core reason for tying is due to conditioned psychopaths being sleepers all across the world. Giving them a sex addiction instead of violence appears to be the solution they came to about what to do with it. This ties into Star Trek Voyager, which began right after Carl Sagan died. A show that begins by talking about an attempt at pacifying guerrilla fighters that don't accept a recent truce between the Federation and Cardassians. A story about recruiting pervert with an ankle bracelet that keeps track of him, recruiting him on a ship that looks like a computer mouse. I'll be going into Star Trek Voyager extensively later, but just to show a pattern. Note some of the stars. A man named Dick Wong. December 15, 1968. Star Trek Voyager. Dick Wong born. December 15, 1968. First U.S. X-rated film debut about a peeping Tom. His best friend is a sex-obsessed man named Tom Paris, but far more interesting is the holographic doctor. Remember the Hollow Pursuit Star Trek episode about internet pornography and how it was tied to the pale blue dot? April 30, 1990. Star Trek TNG, episode about masturbation addiction. Hollow internet comms. May 1, 1990. Pale blue dot finishes sending image. Holograms used as a symbol for fake experiences. This ties into pornography with sexual gratification. This sex connection with Voyager goes far beyond Harry Kim. Note two other main characters from Voyager. The doctor played a gynecologist named Dr. Dick. No, that's not a typo. Dr. Dick Richard. He originally auditioned for the role of ship's cook, which ended up going to another gynecologist actor. That's absurd, but there is a point to it. The symbolism is that both men were tied to sex comms, and so they understood the role having an association to it, which is why either one could play either role. Remember that another main character, Harry Kim, was named Richard Wong. Again 2x sex. Note Dr. Dick in Voyager is a hologram doctor. Remember the hologram was used to symbolize hollow sexual pursuits the same day the pale blue dot finished transmitting. Star Trek symbolism is as it sounds, going to faraway places and investigating. The pilot episode for Star Trek episode is about the captain being caught in a sex trap by a young woman controlled by aliens, while the second episode is about a child murderer. The two big pushes. Both the pilot and first episode have titles that define a man to be trapped. The next episode being about a child murderer left suffering all his life with aliens incapable of showing love. The symbol of the intentionally bad parenting that leads to a programmed killer. This is Star Trek, the visiting of these worlds, whether they be blackmail ops or MK. In both cases they are heavily surveilled and recorded. As technology progressed, so too did the methodologies to monitor and condition. Voyager adding the internet to the ops vastly increased the amount of data possible to collect. The Finder's case proves this, as they used a 1977 computer that came out the same month as Voyager to coordinate child abuse. The famous Prime Directive of Star Trek, never interfering with primitive violent worlds. This is done via surveillance. MK Ultra / blackmail ops. There is a difference in comms in the 70s to 90s. The goal of pacifying was not apparent early on. December 18, 1977. Maladolescenza released to controversy, banned for child pornography and connected to Playboy and Roman Polanski. December 19, 1977. Voyager 1 overtakes Voyager 2. December 21, 1977. DOE establishes Western Area Power Administration with headquarters in Denver, Colorado. The symbolism I suspect is that the two Voyagers represented different surveillance. One being children, and this was a message sent to slow the production of those materials in order to implement more safeguards. Cosmos as a show clearly was tied to the Star Trek lineage of surveillance ops, and as such so too is its modern successor. The host of which is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Note this curious exchange. I've talked before about how blackmail with kids work, that the child is sedated, and so they don't feel it when they sleep but obviously would be in pain when they wake up. The bed bug appears to be the symbol used to define this. I can't think of a more perfect animal symbol. It combines symbolism of anesthetic, numbing, sedation, bed, recording, bugs, and is said to have sex by traumatically stabbing its penis into a wound with no regards to the female. In addition to all of that, the bed bug also functions as a way to explain to the child why they are in pain when they wake and why they need to take extra care to clean their sheets, semen risk. This helps clarify Carl Sagan's ops during the early days in NASA as likely tied to blackmail. He was part of many NASA missions, including the Venus Mariner missions, where he unsuccessfully tried to get a camera installed on Mariner 2. Note a few dates here. May 1961. First ever flyby of Venus Venera 1 by Russia. August 1962, Mariner 2 Venus US launch. August 1962, Spider-Man official date of release. Spider spying, comms plus picture taking for papers. The space race, control of as many as possible in media. Blackmailing. Mariner project was transitioned and renamed Voyager in 1977. This means the Mariners as a word connects strongly to it. Mariners in 1977. Does that ring a bell? The Mariners baseball team began in 1977 alongside Q Clearance and clearly tie into the internet. Nintendo began the purchase of the Mariners around the same time the Soviet Union broke apart. Check my Seattle Post November for more on that, as it's a big subject. 1988 Ken Griffey Sr. moved from Reds, Russia, to Mariners. 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. begins in Mariners. December 23, 1991, Nintendo of Japan agrees to buy Seattle Mariners / Ken Griffey Jr. / Sr. stated as thanks for Americans buying Nintendo products. December 25, 1991, Soviet collapse, KGB, Ken Griffey Jr. becomes a top star. Moves to Reds later. September 3, 1992, Kevin Maxwell largest bankruptcy filing in UK history, 400 million debt Tetris. September 2, 1992, Seattle Mariners 14-game losing streak begins, worst of year and ever. December 10, 1992, Seattle Mariners put up for sale. May 31, 2010, Ken Griffey Jr. final game before surprise retirement. May 31, 2010, Japan detects supernova 17. Robert Maxwell Epstein was the original overseas publisher for Tetris before Nintendo outmaneuvered him. I'm sure a lot of this is confusing, I'm still piecing it together myself. The point is in who was handling data. The symbolism of Seattle star Ken Griffey father and son being the old and new KGB switching from Reds, Russia, to Seattle, Japan/US, and like how I showed Japanese and Chinese involvement last week with the data jumps, so too was this a transition. The success of products is tied to the ops, as it acted as the payment as they received media attention in relation to competitors. I've gone into how Nintendo is connected to the internet before, but it didn't click until this week how it ties together. The Mariners and the KGB connection reconcile with them sending a Venus probe around the same time as Mariner/Voyager. My post on November 8, 2022 went into comms describing an intended plan for Sony and Nintendo to work together. They couldn't get the licensing part right, so they split the work and both received part of the market. I'm getting close to understanding what precisely these entities are doing that gets them the media promotions that allowed them to build into the Goliaths we know. The ops Nintendo attached themselves to originated from ops tied to Carl Sagan. Note his Playboy interview. His catchphrase, billions and billions, as a misquote from Cosmos in 1980. A galaxy is composed of gas and dust and stars, billions upon billions of stars. Every star may be a sun to someone. A reference to the large number of people surveilled, and going into the internet age it would literally be billions. It makes sense they would turn this into a catchphrase, as that's exactly what was happening, the prediction coming true during the time he was most prominent in media. Given how many comms he is tied to, of course his birth is a likely one, as typically people this involved have chosen birth dates carefully chosen long after birth, right before they become known in the media. November 9, 1934, Carl Sagan born. November 9, 1934, Millions and Millions in the Air film song recorded. Note the song makes reference to someone being cuter than Venus, and that the plot of the film attached to it is about an amateur radio show looking for new star talent. Essentially these are tryouts to become stars, the exact kind of thing Carl Sagan is constantly sending comms about. Looking for new intelligent life, it's his entire celebrity. He was the one that made the golden disc sent NASA to aliens on Voyager/Mariner. The use of these ops tied to perversion is nothing new, but the nature changed from blackmailing and/or MKing for the select groups tied to ops versus making the tech available for everyone and then trying to give people addictions and brainwash en masse. There's a lot more, but next let's go over Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Why? Because the threat in the original Star Trek film is literally the Voyager satellite. It's a surprise twist at the end of the film, and an important symbol to decode. Star Trek: Motion Picture Voyager. Film begins with Spock in a ritual to shed all emotion. To understand, I have to decode Spock. Note that at the time it was a name famous for child psychology. Revolutionizing parental upbringing with instant gratification. Reconcile with Spock's lack of emotion. How do parents with no love shown raise children? It's an MK technique. Letting kids do bad things, and rather than stopping simply shaming them as wrong, while not correcting it, acts as a traumatic force. March 15, 1998, Child Psych Spock death. March 15, 1998, Star Trek Picard in Moby Dick. Star Trek First Contact was released not long before this and prominently involved a Moby Dick parallels with Picard as Ahab. The meaning of a futile hunt that will destroy oneself is in the efforts taken to go after cells that engage in MK in the 90s. This will be more relevant when we get into Star Trek Voyager, but the point for this film is that Spock with long life, elf ears, child psychology comms and computer specialty is in him being involved in ops. Note one of the most famous events tied to Nimoy is his famously bad Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. 1966 Star Trek TOS begins. 1966 Evel Knievel begins Daredevil. July 28, 1967, Ballad of Bilbo Baggins famously bad. July 28, 1967, Evel Knievel crash. If you read my last post you understand how motorcycle jumps relate to data exchange. Anyway, Spock disappears from the film for a while, and we focus on a crisis with Starfleet. A mysterious life form approaching Earth destroying anything that comes across it. We learn at the end this is the Voyager satellite Earth built long ago, having collected all the information in the universe it becomes a weapon. Symbol of the power of blackmail. United Nations symbolism. He takes the seat over from Willard. Willard ties right into the Voyager comms as it's tied to recording comms. There's a lot more, and check my Willard post for that, but the point for here is his relationship with Voyager. By the end of the film he merges with Voyager 6 due to his lust for a character from a race known as Deltan, played by a beauty queen with a shaved head. A woman with an oath of celibacy. The symbolism of being bald is a lack of strings, as in someone that is not comms aware. The oath of celibacy plus her being played a beauty queen is tied to the rewards given to girls that become used in blackmail sedation. She represents the ops tied to creating unaware female stars. As in girls used to create blackmail and given great rewards but being forever unaware of what happened. Voyager collects all data, and as it takes her physical form it represents the threat of blackmail exposure. The actual premise of this space probe comes from an episode called One of Our Planets is Missing, which aired within a day of a special Brady Bunch episode with Joe Namath. An episode that begins with Bobby Brady dreaming of Joe Namath visiting him, and the whole episode is about him telling a lie that he knew him. September 21, 1973, Brady Bunch Joe Namath episode. September 22, 1973, Star Trek film origin, One of Our Planets is Missing. The movie is invoking the 1973 comms, which involved a Brady material comm, hiding evidence, with the plot of a sleeping boy effectively pretending he knows a celebrity. Brady Bunch comms are all about hiding a secret through overly wholesome exterior. So the symbolism ties perfectly with the motion picture as it's about getting evidence away from law enforcement. This doesn't mean there was an actual incident involving a child accusing a star, only that they had decided there was a danger to how they were handling data, and they needed to transition the ops and get rid of what was stored in the place it was stored. This is especially clear because they used a quarterback to send the symbolism. Comms of sending a long pass. Note also the following episode is Snow White and the Seven Bradys, as this is a story that involves a child being put to sleep and watched by 7 dwarves until a horny man arrives to kiss her while she is in a comatose state and then give her a reward upon waking. Furthermore, August 6, 1978, Pope death, followed by 33-day reign of next Pope. August 7, 1978. Carter declares Love Canal toxic due to Hooker Chemical Co. August 7, 1978. Star Trek filming begins. The filming began at the same time as a Love Canal plus Hooker plus toxic dump disaster Niagara Falls. As in evidence in a precarious situation. Again, not necessarily an actual disaster with evidence but an awareness that if they kept the ops as they were they could get caught. They used a 33-day temp pope so as to wash their hands of moving evidence. They put a pope in just to have him do something and leave so as to absolve any issues the next pope might have, to wash their hands of it. Kirk forces them to jump to warp, and it results in nearly getting destroyed by an asteroid. Asteroid Scene. Best-selling game in Atari history and came out within a month of the film. Asteroids symbolize ops and the point of nearly getting killed by one due to a bad warp is akin to the failed jump I just discussed. They run the risk of being exposed and thrown in jail without careful planning. Kirk forces them to go unprepared to get to Voyager before Voyager gets to Earth. A feat that only becomes possible because Spock returns. Note that the girl is from Delta IV. When we get into Voyager later, the entire series takes place in the Delta Quadrant. The uncharted space that no Federation ship had ever visited. In both cases the symbolism is in communicating in a new secret way, phone line plus computer in 1977, but before that simply local data collection using home security cameras as the disguise. The concept of exploring strange new worlds being the various MK/blackmail worlds of Venus/Uranus. The same places Voyager was sent to. Security camera systems are installed in participating houses and each one being a different planet. Spock with kinship to a computer. This was the same year they added the modem attachment to complete the communications between computers. They had high-end ones before, but the mass-produced one was 1979. That's why Spock has to reconfigure their old ways of communicating to a new one. As this is the correct way to jump, as in they started using phone lines. Proto-Internet. They invite the beam of light aboard. Remember, this is Voyager. A destructive light that does what? Taken control of computer, just like the TRS-80 series could do based on ads, but most importantly. The Deltan alien with the celibacy oath gets sucked up by the alien beam. Death, and this becomes the form Voyager takes. The alien then takes her form as a probe. Representing not just blackmail but murder now, recorded as they communicate via phone lines. Voyager is on a mission to find her creator. An investigation after collecting evidence. Note Red Letter Media discussing film. They talk extensively about it all being a sex metaphor. That this robot was scanned perfectly, the film talks about her eye moisture, a point among several others that Red Letter Media relates to them suggesting sexual desire in Willard. Even his name sounds like Dick with her intonation. Her role is to collect data. As Voyager was designed to do that and then bring it back to Earth. This is akin to data collection with all the various new pipes online. All the cooperating clown cells effectively blackmailing themselves with every transmission. Her presence as Voyager is the manifestation of all that blackmail. He falls in love with her, but is told she is a mechanism. This being a reference to the people who are used in blackmail not being aware of it. Spock begins recording from outside and attaches himself to the machine. Note the shape of the outer shell of the Voyager ship. Even parody films rarely make it that blunt. I was half tempted to put a diagram of a vagina next to it. Though it's 75% vagina and 25% eye. The symbolism works both ways as it's about surveillance. Spock mind meld equals access a computer. He learns that Voyager knows everything yet is a child. That Voyager came from a planet of living machines. Remember the tie to TRS-80. The most popular PC and the early Windows, as Bill Gates was part of coding it. The symbolism of the vast array of computers suddenly connected is in exactly that. The TRS succeeded in bringing people online, and the data sharing is now a threat. Voyager transmits in simple binary code, phone communication. Trying to obtain and offload information, and the risk is if that happens everyone is destroyed. I.e., if the data gets out into the public hands, then everyone is done for. Designed to collect all data possible and return it to the United Federation. This is about keeping it out of the hands of a POTUS like JFK that wouldn't cooperate. In fact, the sequel to this film originally had a plot of Kirk going back in time to make sure JFK stayed dead. I'm not kidding, Gene Roddenberry was removed from writing. Check the wiki page on the second film for more on that. In my JFK post I showed how he used the data collected as a shield, and this upset parties. The fact that MK data made its way into the hands of the Senate in 1977 is not a miracle, but the very shield JFK used, and so obviously they are keen to prevent another situation like that. August 3, 1977. TRS-80 Bill Gates coded proto-internet-enabled computer used by the Finders cult. Best-selling PC on market. Plus 17Q, Q clearance month. August 20, 1977. Voyager 2 launch with Carl Sagan golden disc inside. August 3, 1977. MK Ultra hearing Senate. August 4, 1977. DOE founded, Q clearance. August 15, 1977. Carl Sagan seeking other worlds, Newsweek. 1980 TRS-80 telephone interface 2. 1980 Cosmos by Carl Sagan. So what solution is there, as they need to prevent the government from collecting the data? They find the old NASA code to get data and sequence like a phone number to receive. Internet. Willard decides to unite with it the data. Willard, as I went over, symbolizes recording/rat, and Voyager symbolizes the receptacle. Effectively allowing individual cells to collect the data rather than using the government in between. Doing so allows them both to evolve. Remember, Willard ties into recording, and so recording unites with machine that records to evolve. Red Letter Media calls it a galactic orgasm. New life form evolution, evolved out of our own human weakness, it says. Which I take to imply involvement in the new computer ops. The process which involves blackmailing yourself, letting them access the data stream. By them, I don't mean government, I mean the specific strings for each specific cell. This diffused existence is the kind preferred over large-scale government control at that time. And that's the end, with them delivering a digital phone baby. The new ops and data handling are marked with the film. Let's discuss Star Trek from another angle. Promotion. Star Trek TNG is when Star Trek went from being a show to a franchise with new crews every other year. By most accounts it remains the most critically successful for both ratings and impact. Given it aired during the years when the internet was just starting to spread like wildfire. So what kind of comms did it have? I suspect the captain, Jean-Luc Picard, is a comm intended to represent Jean-Luc Godard. A man said to have revolutionized the motion picture form through its experimentation with narrative. I've watched all the major Star Trek shows to some extent, and it is the one that put the most effort into the story. It being high quality is itself part of the messaging towards getting the country to adopt the new technologies. And who had those technologies? That'd be Bill Gates. March 2, 1949. Gates McFadden born Star Trek TNG. March 2, 1949, CIA funding asked for by Truman. Note the doctor is named Gates, and Star Trek TNG aired during the time when Bill Gates became the richest in the world. Note she was born the same day Truman first asked for CIA funding. There are other commas in her name, but I'll stick to the most blunt. Note on the right above Bill Gates' parents connected to the Federal Reserve, Planned Parenthood, and most important for here, the United Way, which decides which charities get funded. Just like with his start programming the TRS-80, Bill Gates is tied to promotion by NASA, which is perhaps why. March 13, 1986. First approach of Halley's Comet by ESA. March 13, 1986. Microsoft has its initial public offering, IPO of the year. Notice this is not NASA but ESA Space Agency. It was supposed to be NASA but budget cuts. This is when Reagan was POTUS, but the House of Representatives was Democrat. The budget was therefore controlled by Democrats, and this might be why all the comms I've gone through suggested big tech was tied to the left wing. Just like with the fall of DeLorean due to the UK killing its funding, there was an effort to kick competitors of the old guard out. A good way to discuss this in practical terms is the energy needed to launch a product. Who supplies liftoff into stardom? Mars Rover. This is a video where the original science YouTuber does an egg drop experiment on another science YouTuber's channel. Mark Rober worked with Apple, most importantly NASA, on the Mars rover before becoming a YouTube millionaire. Mark Rober. Mars rover. As silly as that is, these are the little marks that signal intent/history/origin, all sorts of things. Popular YouTube channel with egg drop contest, a tiny CVS receipt, and Mark Rober with one 100 times longer. Comms of investment differences. Note they discuss how NASA doesn't so much build as they do contract out and fund smaller entities to do things. They simply manage them. This is telling us the process. The contractor concept, NASA funds smaller outlets depending on need to send something chosen to become a star. Contracting to smaller companies equals ops of any kind funding, that's the principle while they oversee it. So Mark Rober's egg lands safely, but the exposed one does not. Note they used and drew special attention to long receipts of CVS Pharmacy. May 7, 1963, Telstar 2 launched by Bell. May 8, 1963, CVS Pharmacy first opened, worth $247 billion. July 2, 1962, Walmart first opened, worth $386 billion. July 10, 1962, Telstar 1. This funding to create winners has extended to today. First tweet from space by NASA just as Twitter became a star. What kind of societal push was involved with Twitter being made popular? December 10, 2009, Avatar, Internet Avatar symbol, December 10, 2009. Red Letter Media's Plinkett famously scathing Phantom Menace review, makes many people push anger, December 11, 2009. Angry Birds worldwide release, same year Twitter becomes a star. Red Letter Media's video was famously angry and inspired countless imitators as an entire industry on YouTube pushing hate. Plinkett was the origin point that did as intended and gave an example of how to change minds about something and rile them up. The Angry Birds attacking pigs, communication to get eggs. Eggs represent the initial energy supplied to start an endeavor. This is why MK ops are undertaken, as it gives preferential treatment. Then they get in the system, which allows them to join projects like this which crowd out people without these supports. The larger societal pushes pacify the populace and keep them from likely achieving much in the first place. The point though of getting eggs is much like Kickstarter, launching mass-funded projects. How do such things get exposure? Social media. April 28, 2009, Kickstarter launches. April 28, 2009, Crush the Castle. Proto-Angry Birds. This is why Angry Birds ties into Kickstarter. The connection between the two is in terms of knockoffs. So what about Angry Birds? A con tied to mass media pushing on Twitter and YouTube. December 11, 2009, Bruno Mars right spin me round flow ride a right round, feat Kesha. December 11, 2009. Angry Birds Worldwide throwing birds to attack pigs, ham radio comms, for eggs. Spin me right round like a record, just like retweets. Or the blue angry bird which splits into several birds. Symbol of retweets. I also highlight the gorilla comms of Bruno Mars as it ties into the societal psychological pushes going on. Celebrating laziness. What else is pushed? October 5, 2004. Web 2.0 Expo. October 5, 2004. Leisure Suit Larry College Sex Game Return of the original sex game. This was the same year Facebook began at college. Web 2.0 fits the transition into the more modern platforms. It goes back to the beginning. Carl Sagan discusses a games article. 1977 book by Carl Sagan Dragons of Eden. Note he talks about an article about video games, and how it's the best news since psychedelics. Note the subtitle of Sagan's book, Speculations on the Evolution of Human Intelligence, How Are People Molded with LSD? This reminds me that Steve Jobs stopped working at Atari to go learn about psychedelics, which led him to create Apple. Remember how Beavis and Butthead tied to Carl Sagan? Apple gave him the nickname, Butthead, and then Beavis and Butthead came out the same day Carl Sagan died. A film where Beavis does hallucinogens, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Note the title, That They Do America, what might that symbolize? Beavis and Butthead Do America. Film begins with Butthead picking up a girl in windows, in full view of Beavis, who then goes from mass destroying the city to interested in ogling a girl. Symbolizes looking at pornography. Turning a destructive brainwashed youth into masturbation addiction. This is what they did to pacify the generation they had been using to riot and murder in the early 90s. The whole film is, Do America, as in there are comms throughout of this. Anyway, the movie is about their TV being stolen, which symbolizes the old instructions being removed. As in up until this point there were comms sent coordinating promotion of violence, which Beavis and Butthead were a part of. This ties into South Park, as we have Chef Isaac Hayes doing the soundtrack. This explains why they involved him to tie the two series together. The evolution of these ops. Check my Red Hat Linux decode to refresh yourself if necessary on what South Park was about. September 17, 1991, Home Improvement debut, episode about installing deadbolt security lock. September 17, 1991, Linux first released, new computer security. August 13, 1997, South Park debut. +2. August 15, 1997, GNOME Primary OS for Linux debut. December 14, 1998, GNOME's primary backer, Red Hat, sells to Intel/Netscape. +2. December 16, 1998, GNOME's episode, South Park 17. Coffee house takeover by Starbucks. In a way it's the same thing, as it's now clear South Park was the evolution of those comms. Evident not just by the Isaac Hayes connection but by the fact that in the South Park movie they had Mike Judge be the official voice of Kenny McCormick in a movie where he dies by setting himself on fire on a dare. October 4, 08/1993 187 dead Moscow White House fire. October 6, 1993, 5-year-old Austin Messner reportedly inspired by Beavis and Butthead sets fire to home killing sister. As has been reported more recently, they didn't have cable, and so this is likely a comm, as the brainwashing ops were discussed. This drive to turn kids into murderers was marked by Beavis and Butthead, and as such they became the symbol of it. As time went on, this position appears to have become untenable, and so they shifted the comms away from it. Note after the intro section, which is made after Shaft, a movie I assume has some strong sexual connotations. The driving force we get is Butthead pulling pornography out of the trash, showing it to Beavis. Part of what is going on is conditioning of the audience, and the show is famous for that, as it led to kids putting an animal in a dryer and lighting a home on fire. I have a hard time believing such a tactic could work on regular kids, but an MK kid certainly could. Ambivalence at being expelled. The point with that is they had teachers that symbolized the MK pushes, and so effectively they are being instructed to transition out of it. Destroying the school TV equals ending those particular brainwashing ops. They are said to have a history of chronically masturbating in Anderson's tool shed. Later Beavis does this and the movie ends with him talking about doing it again soon. Conditioning into a bad habit. They get hired to murder. This is tying into MK ops. Did we miss Baywatch, which is precisely the kind of ops tied to watching them? Baywatch ties into Home Improvement. Image above has dates shown. September 17, 1991, Home Improvement debut, episode about installing deadbolt security lock. September 17, 1991, Linux first released, new computer security. August 13, 1997, South Park debut. Plus 2 days. August 15, 1997, GNOME Primary OS for Linux debut. December 14, 1998, GNOME's primary backer, Red Hat, sells to Intel/Netscape. Plus 2 days. December 16, 1998, GNOME's episode, South Park 17. Coffee house takeover by Starbucks. Home improv as in improvisation. If you read my Home Improvement decode, you know this too was tied into the home surveillance ops. In both cases timed to Linux, as it was how security was handled. They get drunk. Dallas, the name of the one to kill. Which, given the time frame and assassination history of Dallas, trying to change course on various brainwashing ops that were already in motion. To skip ahead, by the end of the film Beavis will be viewed as a walking biological weapon of mass destruction, akin to a nuke. This ties into the fear that had been sown of the brainwashed being sent after people. This is why the very last section of the film, all of the conflict is resolved when Butthead hands Beavis's unit to the military. Butthead with braces is a symbol of control. This is why Butthead leads Beavis, and is the one pushing him into masturbation instead of violence. The whole concept of the show was teaching people to brainwash a Beavis by acting as a Butthead to effectively condition them into violence by giving MK kids abandoned by parents a friend. This is why now that the transition has happened, Butthead gives masturbation hand motions. As this is tied to conditioning at the time. I believe part of what was going on with this is an agreement to take violent kids and pacify them with sex addiction. Around 1993, when Clinton got through it all, switched from violence pushing to pacifying it, temporarily, and that is why everything is about them being obsessed with sex. In the early show they would focus on violence. Very first Beavis and Butthead sequence. A man asserting, "I guarantee it." Cop rock at 9, flipped 6. Then I found Thigh Master, it's easy to squeeze. Transitions to Beavis and Butthead. This is symbolism for Beavis and Butthead being the solution to flips. How? The symbol is of using brainwashed idiots as threats to quiet anyone. Read it again. I guarantee it equals this will happen. Cop rock at 9, flipped 6, equals cops will turn people against you and get evidence. Then I found Thigh Master, it's easy to squeeze equals the way to fix this is by using threats. Transitions to Beavis and Butthead. Equals the solution is in purchasing MK Ultra to make an example. They are conditioned to go from playing with firecrackers to killing frogs to killing an expensive dog owned by someone. To be continued, and the dog screams as they beat the rich woman's dog to death with a baseball bat. Columbine killers began with animals, and it's a way to condition them to escalate until killing people is the same as going from a frog to a dog. Thus this show acts not just as a calm for creating psychopaths but as a warning on how easy it is to achieve this goal. The poodle being Higgins is surely a calm. Here are some possible connection dates. The most famous, Higgins, alongside some curious data points around his birth. Especially interesting given JFK was killed in Dallas this year. February 11, 1963, Sylvia Plath Suicide Origin Genre of Confessional Poetry. February 11, 1963, CIA Domestic Operations Division created. February 11, 1963, Julia Child French chef premieres John Morris Cooking. February 12, 1963, John Michael Higgins famous actor born. February 12, 1963, Northwest Airlines Flight 705 crashes in the Florida Everglades, killing all 43 aboard. But now when Dallas tries to get them to kill, it's all misconstrued as sex. Here all motivations are about sex. Using sex to motivate them to smuggle instead of kill. Unlike the other Grimes, she takes a deal and gets away at the end. Grimes, as a name, rings a few bells for recent comms and may help clarify the next time I decode Grimes. The way MK ops work is impossible to get the perpetrators. The ones hiring them to perform murders are coordinated indirectly. She sends Beavis and Butthead to the Hoover Dam, where they turn off the lights and release the floodgate. The masturbation control panel, he calls it. The symbolism being the awareness of the murder ops that the psychopaths have been effectively disabled by introducing a different mental illness that will interfere with the primary one long cultivated. This seems like a good point to pause on the masturbation control comm. When I looked up pale blue dot songs, there's quite a few of them. Note some patterns. Siren song tied to it as in alluring voices. Ninja sex party. Most interestingly is this lyrics, out on the dance floor we have found a reason to lay our weapons down. This gave me a hint that, hey, maybe dance is a symbol for masturbation. I thought, well, if that's true, then I bet that Just Dance game came out timed to something associated with that. When did it come out? November 17, 2009. Just Dance, first in long line of games. November 16, 2009. Chat Roulette, infamously associated with teaching kids to masturbate and have dance parties. Note some of the songs like Jerk It Out, so yeah, this seems highly likely. The language is getting more clear every post. That's just a side note. Army recruits equals history of MK with military origins. Going to Colorado and into a confessional. When Beavis tries to get someone to hurt themselves, God literally hits them with a bolt of lightning. Comms of, if they misbehave, then we punish. Then they go from violence to more sex jokes. Hard wood. A couple of spider monkeys, as in just like Hank Hill. When I decoded it, he represents someone involved in those ops. Enabling them but acting at a distance. Anyway, this ties into the people around Beavis and Butthead being punished for their actions. Motley Crue roadies as parents. Note they want a match as in to light a bomb, and they are wanted by FBI. As in the parents responsible for creating MK. The parents abandon the sons and effectively lead them into hallucinogens. LSD being an effective way to create a drug-fueled murderer. So Beavis then takes drugs, as just as with when Beavis convinced a man to hurt himself, we are now seeing, what if, a situation in them becoming psychotic. Drug use, bugs. Then, muddy Bruce Willis forcing them to be driven right after drugs. How to escape being driven by a killer. Jacking off. The jacking off solution to this problem, just as the lightning bolt was before. I may not have the entirety of symbolism dissected, but the masturbation as a way to prevent murders seems to be a clear one. There is one aspect that seems to not perfectly align, which is them creating a massive car accidents. However, neither they nor anyone else is harmed, which I suspect is due to the fact that we are talking about symbolism. That them not being driven acts as a catalyst to remove others. Thus the pileup is symbolic of ending the entire wave of it. Grimes is voiced by Demi Moore and rats out Bruce Willis. Muddy Grimes. Now we have yet another angle to create a psychopath, being OTC drugs rather than illegal ones. What if? POTUS threats, military reacting to insanity and unsure what to do. Threatening POTUS. Notice this is where Butthead brings up his braces. What is his brace this time? The solution to Beavis going insane after taking drugs? Solution. Masturbating in the camper of Anderson. Throughout the whole film he has been conditioned to masturbate, and this is the moment when he does, effectively being drugged up on, and rather than attacking he does what he has been trained to do. There is another layer as well, as Anderson represented one of the drivers. Therefore his surveillance of an underage child masturbating becomes evidence. Effectively it's asserting that by introducing this addiction it gives a backdoor way to go after anyone monitoring them to brainwash. So we get into the final part, where they find his unit is actually in possession of Anderson, which Butthead catches and hands to the government. As Butthead is the braces, they say Anderson used to abuse them. Lead to the sickest criminals in history caught. Actions remaining top secret. They become part of the government as funding leads to a backdoor control of what was scattered cells. Funding does not equate to taking over the cells, only subverting what was there. And immediately Beavis goes back to masturbating. They get their TV back, which is to say coordinated again by TV. The ops continue just in a different direction. Check my posts on Clinton becoming POTUS for more on why. The short version is that the brainwashing was done to take over, as in Clinton being elected. Rather than fight to the bitter end, a deal was made to allow Clinton to be president. Part of the deal made to allow this was in becoming a bodyguard for their former targets. This is why the comms did a sudden massive shift here, but because it's all cell-based, many cells didn't agree to just stand down. This is particularly evident when we get into 1995 Star Trek Voyager. This was a year before Beavis and Butthead Do America and 2 years after Clinton got into the White House, which means it's even closer to when they transitioned. December 15, 1968. Star Trek Voyager, Dick Wong born. December 15, 1968. First U.S. X-rated film debut about a peeping Tom. Additionally, the doctor and cook as I went into have strong ties to sexual comms, and there is much more to that, but to understand the nuance we need to go in sequence. Star Trek Voyager, Delta/Deltan. The concept, just like with Beavis and Butthead, is despite there being a treaty, rogue factions continue to attack former enemies. IRL, this equates to using MK, and that's what these sex ops are a remedy against. Thus the show starts with a terrorist group heading to the Badlands, and the remedy for this is Voyager. The captain of which employs former terrorists with ankle bracelets to find current terrorists. In effect, it acts like Butthead to Beavis as he gets future terrorists to switch from violence to sex. Thus, just like Butthead to Beavis, we get a Tom Paris recruited. His first scene after being released from prison involves a line that he moves at warp speed toward women when they're in visual range. The point is in how he will resolve the situation with his targets. His name Tom Paris equals Peeping Tom plus Paris, City of Love. The very next scene involves him becoming friends with the guy born on the same day as the first X-rated film, which was about a peeping Tom. He becomes friends by helping him out of a scam that threatened to humiliate. Symbolism of MK. Tom acts as observer and becomes friends with the new guy, Kim, as they go and stalk the terrorists. Symbolism of the collaboration between the parties for handling MK. In theory, it's pacification, but it's more complex than that. Remember the original Voyager symbol, the root is not perversion but instead the internet itself. These are comms specifically about pushing people into online addictions. The central premise of the show is being stranded in secret parts of the galaxy. Symbolism of the perverse parts. This ties into the medical doctor that acts like a search engine. He's a hologram, and the episode transitions with the whole crew being taken to a holographic party. An old woman, pitcher, and cookie, as in someone to track, cookie, and pitching it, which leads to holographic girls seducing Kim and Tom Paris. Remember the origin of the Star Trek hologram comms tied to pornography addiction. Tom effectively talks Kim into following him to the sex barn. This leads to Kim being the only one that gets abducted as the rest are returned. Note the girl asking if they want deviled eggs. Symbol of obtaining early development, devils, brainwashed. They meet the terrorists who already had a spy among them from Voyager. A being called the Caretaker is studying Kim. They find themselves in a debris field and meet Neelix, who just like the Doctor was tied to various sex comms. What does Neelix want? Water equals info. Understanding why he wants information will be clear later. We learn of the other person abducted with Kim half Klingon with violent urges. Symbolism like with Kim's naivete, the violent people needing to be pacified by the ops. That they are a danger to their fellow people, and so they are taken across the universe away from it into that holographic orgy. Then they are taken care of as they are ill. Mentally ill. Neelix meanwhile brings the Voyager to find them by bartering water, which leads to a crucial character to discuss. The partner of Neelix, who becomes ship's cook. She becomes assistant to the holographic Dr. Dick. Note her race only 9 years, and she was reported to only be intended to live to age 7. Note the girl with the 7 to 9 year lifespan was replaced by a character named 7 of 9. Perhaps the most famous character from the show. A character designed to look naked and hooked up forever to technology as a zombie. The symbolism is the same for both characters, as it represents the prescription of what they do to pacify the problematic ones. That's why this connection is a thing. Remember, the whole story is about pacifying the gorilla Marquis in the first episode. August 24, 1974. Titus-born gorilla monitored his whole life as he led the largest gorilla troop. August 24, 1974. Jenny Lind. Jenny Lind. You may remember Jenny Lind tied a gorilla comm I went over in another post. Tied to evolution comms. This is the same here as they discuss evolution and how they have gone backwards, but the more important part is that the caretaker of the ill, mentally ill, is looking for a replacement as a caretaker. A role Voyager accepts at least in a limited fashion. Stocks them up with energy for 5 years and then that's it. As in, these perverse ops were to have a 5-year time frame of pacification, not a permanent solution, but just addicting them to pornography as what they suggest is a civil service to avoid them becoming terrorists. And with that they merged the two groups in uncharted space. Remember the Deltan race from the Star Trek movie with Voyager? Note the unexplored area of space only Voyager goes to is the Delta Quadrant. Despite both being about Voyager from Delta, these are different comms. It's simply invoking the old comm about sex that was already tied to the internet to apply it in a new way to a wider scale. Before I move on, I want to mention that the holographic doctor tied to sex that acts like a search engine takes on the name Joe. I suspect the symbolism is of a solution for everyone. Joe equals average Joe. That's a hypothesis, haven't tested it, but I mention it as I can reference back later whether I was right or wrong. I also suspect his name, Picardo, was chosen as it ties to Picard. I went over the Jean-Luc before, but the most famous Picard I can find seems to be this golf champion nicknamed Pic. Pic being a perfect symbol for internet searching. This connection is much weaker than the others, but only because I haven't fully cracked golf symbolism. When I do, whether this is the right or wrong connection will become clear. You can tell from the last two examples there's a push towards social engineering. Brainwashing is part of it, but the takeaway is utility to remove threats. Though this could be interpreted as an excuse, pushing sexual perversion to replace potential violence is an interesting moral quandary. There is so much media that exists to mold us in various ways from birth to death. Despite them choosing to push sex as a fix, a much more humane choice would have been philosophy. Japan had a similar problem to the US, and at least partially they came to a much better solution on handling the youth. The most popular pieces of media for youth in Japan, for example. September 21, 1999, End of Kenshin Run. September 21, 1999, Naruto manga begins. July 7, 2014, My Hero Academia, Ninja School. November 10, 2014, Naruto manga end, Superhero School. Check my anime post for a much deeper breakdown, but the point of the chart above is to show how the most popular pieces of media are timed to end and begin so as to take up the space of popularity. They know what's going to be popular, and they have purposes far beyond the smaller titles. The most popular one being One Piece is worth expounding on. I went over how both One Piece and Naruto had cons of a cheap solution, ramen/straw hat, to the problem of child criminals. In One Piece in particular, the way this was handled was in teaching a child not to be a jerk and adopt a self-sacrificing philosophy to improve the community. It is too complex to go into One Piece here, but the most transparent of all of them is My Hero Academia. A series that has at its core the philosophy of passing down a will to be a good citizen. It dresses itself up in American superhero mythos, though it shares virtually nothing in common with those properties in purpose, at least to the extent I've read US comics. The ones I read were not philosophical but instead power fantasies and conditioning to fight, if anything. The exact opposite. Taking in the DNA of the strongest hero. DNA equals building blocks, and then he does public service. The important part of this show that made me want to discuss it here is the relationship of the main character and his rival. The point being to help someone who is cruel to you rather than attack them. Throughout the series it involves a character who is a massive bully, and in most shows like this it gives a counterproductive message when the hero beats them up and makes them an ally. The psychological aspects of the dynamic are much like in One Piece, which began with a message of never resorting to violence over anything less than actual violence itself. I.e., not allowing humiliation to light a fuse. In this one we see the character in the first episode, despite being bullied, trying to save him from being consumed by evil. It's practically a running theme of it as the bully continues on despite it. The point critically is in showing the children in the audience to not react aggressively and try to help, even though it's not the first reaction most would have. Ingrain a role model figure makes it so that when challenged, rather than becoming a villain, they are only interested in the opposite. Especially for MK victims, the act of beating the heck out of them or laughing at them is not the right tack to take. Dragon Ball conditioning is the opposite of this and One Piece. One Piece was given a famously bad localization to kill it in the USA despite being the most popular series of all time in Japan. The motives ran contrary to what was desired. American media for children in comparison is often either about conditioning the child into idiocy or sending comms for the children of clowns for ops. It's one of those things that if people understood how important media was in shaping young minds, and especially if they understood that the people behind the media know exactly what they are doing with manipulations, we'd have a vastly different world. People want their kids to be smart, kind, and healthy, and if the world were designed with that in mind, practically every problem that has ever existed in the world would vanish. It's a cycle of stupidity we all need to escape from. Speaking of which, there was a new Beavis and Butthead film this year, and given I decoded the other film, of course I had to look at this one. 2022, Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. The film begins in space with Beavis and Butthead not paying attention to driving, leading to their apparent death. They then assert they will tell the greatest story of all time, which starts in 1998 with Butthead kicking Beavis in the testicles over and over again. Remember the comms of the last film, which involves going from violence to sex. Having him constantly being kicked in the balls seems to be the symbol for those ops. This story ties into what's going on behind the scenes right now with MK victims. The death at the very start connecting to the many fake deaths I've gone over as things are cleaned up behind the scenes. Update section will go over. They end up setting the entire place on fire, but instead of being punished for it, they are sent to space camp. The meaning of this is in how people involved in MK are promoted. This wouldn't apply to the victims, of course, but that's because, as we'll see later, they aren't the ones that will benefit. So they go to NASA and learn they are sending up a telescope to look at a small black hole. The symbol here is in viewing the secret ops tied to brainwashing kids. I'm going to skip ahead as it will make things more clear. The larger plot of the movie takes place in 2022 with the NASA pilot as the antagonist who believes she murdered Beavis and Butthead in 1998. She has since become governor of Texas and is now haunted by the memory of how she murdered them. In fact, they simply went through the black hole, at least that's the basic reading. In reality, we are talking about symbolism of trying to erase past sins to avoid jail time. This is what's been going on behind the scenes, as I have talked about in many posts. So this is why Beavis and Butthead going to space camp represents something very different from what we see visually. NASA Space Camp is used for kids involved in MK Ops, I know that for a fact due to my own background. And if successful they do become stars. So this is why when Beavis and Butthead are shown to be geniuses at handling the docking because they think it's like sex, the symbolism is really about them being tools. She scouts them out and then tricks them into becoming astronauts as they misunderstand what is being asked of them and believe the NASA pilot is asking them for sex. They are set loose and create a 2 billion international incident and murder. She baits them into making bad decisions, though it has to work as a movie, so it can be interpreted either way. And eventually outright asserts human sacrifices need to be made. If you watch it and take it at face value, she appears to try and sacrifice her own life before finally getting fed up and trying to kill them. When taken this way, much of the plot makes no sense, as them being alive should entirely absolve her of guilt. Instead, she believes that they will tell what she did and ruin her career. Juggling comms and plots for the masses is likely tough. There are so few good movies that can manage it. Anyway, she does become a star after the sacrifice. Leads to her becoming the governor. As they travel in time, there is talk of nuke lost and then invader by alien, which they outright compare to Russia/China insurgent as it represents the same thing. Nukes represent booms, which can be blackmail used on a powerful figure or simply an MK kid that's been conditioned to shoot up a school. Thus the talk of a lost nuke plus alien is a talk of which country is brainwashing a minor to avoid detection and turn into a weapon. They meet alternate universe versions of themselves which assert they need to enter a wormhole back to 1998 to save the universe. The governor asserts she needs to kill them to protect herself from jail. Note Beavis talking to Siri, effectively recording testimony of being abused. The concept being what is buried and why murders are still a problem for those individuals, as future testimony could bring them down. There's a bit about white privilege, but it's not clear to me if they are just making fun of it or if it's a part of the commentary on brainwashing. Regardless, the governor is being chased and paranoid. The warden of the jail decides to let the boys leave jail and erase all their records. This also happened in the last courtroom due to the fire at the start of the film. In both cases the judge plus warden says records are all gone on these two, and we aren't going to punish them but instead help them along their way. Both the judge in 1998 and the warden in 2022 give their reason for doing this as having watched Touched by an Angel. The meaning of this, I'd need to watch the show to be sure, but I suspect it's simply asserting they are plants for the same entity. The governor frees criminals to go after the two but then just get tied up by it. Symbolism of trying to employ criminals backfiring. Beavis dreams of deer/DOE, and then they go to their old house finding it's for sale. Destroying an apple in the garbage disposal instead of hearing the history of parents. Again, comms of records being destroyed. In this case, computer records. Talk of a government settlement for their deaths. They get separated, with one being held by federal gov and other by the state. Both with their own motives for holding. A third party tries to use them to remove the governor by telling the story to reporters. This might parallel the various parties involved in holding the victims. The more recent the comms, the harder time I have in reading intent. As you'll see in the next section, it's very clear massive things are going on right now dealing with whistleblowers and evidence. That's why the climax of this film, which involves a whistleblower trying to make crimes done against Beavis and Butthead, significant. The whistleblower is used to plug the 1998 wormhole that would have destroyed the universe. Instead of killing Beavis and Butthead, the governor helps them get out of homelessness. She also has sex with smart Beavis in exchange for keeping silent. That part is tricky to interpret. Obviously part of it is done as a joke, as it has to work as a film. Taking a step back, the whole story was an attempt at destroying the governor that was trying to kill them using their testimony of what happened in 1998 at NASA. This attempt at making crimes public is rejected at the end as she helps them, and so instead of her being destroyed, the whistleblower is silenced by a wormhole just as he was making the call. The point in making the whistleblower the villain is perhaps in stopping what would naturally happen when these kinds of horrific things are made public. i.e. mainstream media weaponizing a juicy story to take out various political figures. At a glance it sounds like a noble thing, but that's not how it works in practice. The media is controlled and as such they carefully give voices only to the people that suit their agenda. Cherry-picking the perfect victims to further the goals of people tied to them. I agree that seemingly inevitable event should be stopped, and I hope that's what is meant with keeping whistleblowers quiet. I could interpret it less generously, but based on everything else I see in comms I think it fits. Especially what I'll be going over in the next section. Additionally we see a, what if, they had lived for the next 24 years, and it has them living in squalor beating each other. The implication with moving them into a nicer place could imply helping these kinds of people out. Update, World Cup. Arguably the biggest sports event in the world has been going on this last month with FIFA. Soccer comms are something I've been keeping track of for some time. Albeit it's one of my worst subjects. My decoding up until now is that the defining characteristic of soccer is passing and as such it represents data being moved and stored. This specific event was meaningful as I believe it represented the solidifying of control by Trump as he received the strings stored in servers Putin had. The whole event effectively a calm to tell one party to give another party evidence. July 16, 2018, Trump-Putin Helsinki Summit. July 17, 2018, 10 new moons of Jupiter confirmed. That evidence then behind the scenes could be used to pick away at the forces threatening the country. The strings held include the likes of Biden, though you may need to read my posts on COVID to understand why things have taken the form they have. October 18, 2019, Bill Gates' Dark Winter Coronavirus Conference. October 18, 2019, Wuhan World Military Games. November 17, 2019, Wuhan first case of coronavirus. I bring this up because I believe this transfer of evidence is crucial to everything going on right now. We have a sports star named Lionel Messi as well as the breakout star Julian Alvarez as the biggest sports news in the world right now as their Argentina team just won FIFA. Julian A. Also called the Spider. Do you know any Julian A's that happen to have a lot of spy work collected? Might this be a calm of Julian Assange winning? However, even more curious than that is the fact that their team is Argentina, but their name is Paris with the logo of France on it. They just beat France by way of penalties. My first take on this was a calm of playing for the opposing team. Maxwell is tied to Paris and so what we may be seeing is symbolism of coordinated defeats, i.e. things like Maxwell taking a deal to name names. If we combine this with Julian Assange's data coming into play it would be world-shaking. However, while I'm pretty sure Julian A. Spider represents Assange, what does Lionel Mess represent? Wait. Spider? February 4, 2004. Lionel Messi first professional contract. February 4, 2004. Facebook founded. February 4, 2004. Government DARPA LifeLog project ends. June 28, 2004. Sony Spider-Man 2. June 29, 2004. Lionel Messi first game for Argentina. Spy, I go into it in this my Sony post, but I'm always finding more. The point this time is Messi connects to Facebook, which is a new find this week for me. This means Facebook is likely crucial to whatever is going on behind the scenes, but what is going on? Let's look at a few more pieces. Actually, before that, I want to mention I made yet another new connection this week as I found at the same timeframe Facebook began Mark Zuckerberg recruited a famous Parker from Napster. It could be coincidence, but I can't help but think it was just another Spider-Man comm. This all ties into Messi as the Paris team beating France, which was used to define Maxwell. An insider turning the tables on some very big entities. So what does it mean for Messi to beat France? Kanye West has been a pretty good compass. Note that he has a rap where he talks about Messi. An international soccer star in a rap, is that common? Note the lyric, "Sellin', they sold for a repost," this tie into how funding is acquired. An exchange for involvement in the MK system. Note many of the songs involve people going to jail and naming names. About getting data off cell phones to convict. This reminds me of some of Facebook's patents. Using your phone's location to establish your primary residence. Correlating your phone to others to track habits, socialization, sleeping, etc. Using your phone mic to identify things you watch. Creating a cam signature to identify your photos when uploaded by others. Using your personal messages plus credit transactions to predict future actions. I could make a whole post on creepy Facebook tracking, but let's stick with Kanye for a moment. This album, Donda, was named after his mother who died in a very unusual circumstance. Death a day after getting cosmetic surgery, breast reduction, and liposuction. As in the kinds of things you do to begin hiding. August 26, 2021. Biden's dog Major bit Secret Service members 8 days in row email show. August 26, 2021. Chicago Donda listening party. The dead celebrities behind the scenes with evidence. Note the controversy surrounding Donda, including having Marilyn Manson and DaBaby. November 13, 2020. Donda Na Na Na, controversial song about election. November 13, 2020. Eunice Anna's year-long countdown ends with fully deleted channel. Eunice Annas involved the most popular gamer on YouTube making videos daily for a year with the intent from the start of deleting them all on the last day. Note the lead up to the deleting. Everything's legal if you're dead. This may have been referencing the ops like Donda, as in someone officially dead but not really. Ducking law enforcement by faking deaths, it's a major thing going on as a way to clean house around the world. I've gone over those comms in a few posts, most notably the video they did referencing escaping from hostage situations. As that's the reason why so much of the world is messed up as people are forced to do evil as strings are pulled. Cutting those strings might just be the most complicated operation in the history of mankind. This highlights the flexibility of comms as they are used for so many purposes. Picture this famous song the same day as a major imaging software giant is created. January 29, 1982. Picture this Huey Lewis and the News founded. January 30, 1982. Autodesk founded Top Tech. Or then it can go in the other direction where a company can invoke the comms they see in the media so as to associate themselves. August 1986. Hip to be Square, by 4. September 1986. Square founded. I went over Enix last week as tied to the data transfer ops. The same is probably true here. Sorry, a bit of a detour, I just wanted to include that as it was a reader who found that last connection. I always try and say when that's the case, but I'm sure I've missed a couple. Anyway, note both Kanye and Musk losing billions this last month. Putin and Trump have also recently said to be on their last legs. There is a reason for this. As Elon Musk said on December 22, 3:07 and 27 seconds. Elon Musk, there's stormy weather ahead, but then it's gonna be sunshine thereafter. Where have we heard that kind of lingo before? What do you think when you hear the words, calm before the storm? August 15, 2019. Musk plus Hammer, nuke Mars. August 15, 2019. Maxwell spotted at In-N-Out Burger after Epstein death with book on deaths of CIA agents. Hammer equals Judge Gavel. Note the Christmas plus Hammer Q sent. Hammer Jeans comms sent by Musk. It's all coming back to what's been long planned out. The more comms sent across more of the media spectrum, the louder the voice. This is why multiple sports are sending comms about it around the world. Another Hammer comm, the Vikings with mascot of hammer wielding Thunder God in the NFC title, biggest comeback in NFL history. Coming back with 33 points. Note the phrasing of the comeback. It was an ugly first half. We are still in the setup, coordinating the symbolism of why things look bad now and what happens afterwards. The 33 comm is just like the soccer game with Messi and Julian being 3-3. 33 comms are as best I can tell about building something up. Whether it's the WHO, Disney, or Biden. Remember what Musk said, it looks bad, but then it's going to be great. Note Mr. Beast's reply as Musk unleashes Twitter crimes. Note Mr. Beast promoting Fortnite as he does this. Symbol of those hiding out after death, and one possible purpose of which is when big people go down they can't finger someone to make a deal that's on the other side cooperating. What kind of legal things going on? Partial list. December 21, 2022. Election contest lawsuit going to trial this week. December 20, 2022. Georgia Supreme Court sends election lawsuit back to appeals to reconsider. December 21, 2022. Texts show Pelosi office directly involved in failed January 6 security. December 19, 2022. Kari Lake wins right to bring election fraud case to trial. Another comm setting this up. August 11, 2022. Tom Brady break taken. August 12, 2022. Beetlejuice never before seen massive eruption. Tom Brady leaves, Brady equals evidence protection symbol, and suddenly Beetlejuice erupts. What does Beetlejuice symbolize? December 13, 1920. Beetlejuice first star to be measured. December 13, 1920. International Court of Justice begins. This was back in August, and I believe represented a lot of the bones being put into place for the things we are going to see. The final decode of my post gives me an inclination on what is meant. December 23, 2022. 50th anniversary of Immaculate Reception by Franco Harris. December 20, 2022. Franco Harris death. December 7, 1972. Apollo 17 last moon mission launched. December 12, 1972. Rothschild Diamond Stag Party with coded letters. December 19, 1972. Apollo 17 ends final moon mission. December 23, 1972. Immaculate Reception play, considered greatest play in NFL history. December 28, 1972. Kim Il-sung becomes President of North Korea. Immaculate Reception equals Immaculate Conception. I suspect the symbolism is equals hiding the act of sex. Often these comms are derivatives going back generations, for example. He was born in Fort Dix, New Jersey. March 7, 1950. Franco Harris born Fort Dix, New Jersey. March 7, 1950. Dick Camel Button from New Jersey wins World Championship in London ice skating. Same day a famous Dick from New Jersey won a World Championship in ice skating. Taking all of this into consideration as well as the other news around that time, and I'd say there's a good chance what is being symbolized is Assange's data being received. Remember FIFA had comms tied to Julian Assange. It's something we've all anticipated for years now. I'm not good enough yet at decoding to be confident of this, but this feels like where all the comms have been pointed to. Timing it to the most famous reception in football, which itself appears to have symbolized moving blackmail data, Fort Dick, away from legal eyes, to then use those same comms to move it back. To have the very person who symbolized moving it die, and become yet another testimonial in the future explaining all of these ops. This feels like the precise kinds of symbols they could set up years in advance. Just like Musk and Kanye and Trump and Putin right now having the worst possible starts, so too did Argentina, as it says above. October 28, 2017. Durham appointed by Jeff Sessions. October 28, 2017. Q's first post. All of it tied together with symbolism of a Durham boat on the Delaware River. Where is Joe Biden from again? It's been a long road, but we may finally see that light we've been waiting for. At a glance it looks like things are going terribly, but once again. As Elon Musk said on December 22, linked above. Elon Musk, there's stormy weather ahead, but then it's gonna be sunshine thereafter. I do believe we've seen the choreography for what's to come, and so let's see what happens. Telegram chat. Join our Telegram group. Send leads, begin decoding. Also, I cut out about 30% of the post due to running out of room. This includes a section where I decoded sudden death, a reader requested. I think I told them it would be in the next post, but it might be in the one after this or even later. I found many leads across so many sports, and I'm still such a novice with sports that I want to spend more time before laying out my thoughts. I really do begin most of these posts just by digging into whatever I see requested on Telegram and all the other places I post at. The way I look at it is I can decode just about anything popular, so why not focus on what the readers most want to see? I can't know what that is if you don't speak up. This has been Voyager.